my name is Amy Lishman and I'm the Head of Member Engagement at Brighton Chamber, and I'm going to be your host for the next hour or so. I'm really delighted to be here today and joined by Martin Williams and Tom Boniface. Martin is Head of Employment at Mayo, Wynne, Baxter and a partner at that firm. And Mayo, Wynne, Baxter have various offices across Sussex with specialist solicitors in most areas of the law. Tom Boniface is Private Client Tax Senior Manager with Kreston Reeves. Kreston Reeves are chartered accountants and financial advisors based in London, Kent and Sussex, and they advise businesses, individuals and not-for-profits. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tom and Martin. And this topic is certainly very timely, given the fact that the restrictions have all but eased this week, and businesses are now looking at how and where staff will work going forward as we adjust to this new normal that we are in. So the first question for you, Martin, a big one. What exactly is hybrid or blended working? What's it all about?
Oh, it could be whatever you wanted it to be, really. There is no legal definition at all. We used to talk about home working, and then because over the last 16 months or so, we've decided that there's a whole new slew of words that we can invent and apply them to the employment sector, that hybrid or blended working can be, the new a part of the lexicon. It's, in some respects, it's combining the office working and working elsewhere, and elsewhere need not be the home. So obviously before, when we were talking about sort of home working, people were thinking, oh yeah, we allow them to work at home, but the whole point of coming up with a new phrase is that it's not necessarily just at home. Is it something that probably would have happened eventually? I think it probably would, with the amount of technology that we've got and what have you. It's just that the pandemic has speeded it up a bit. But I don't think we should get away that it's omnipresent. There are obviously changes that we've witnessed in this part of the world, but we're a heavy commuter belt sort of part of the country here, and surveys have shown that the relocation from the office has been most prevalent in the southeast and in London. So as well as geography, we're also looking at different types of work, because obviously some work is location specific and it's very hard to do from home. Obviously, being a security guard at Sainsbury's is difficult to do from your own home. But then it can also vary on seniority, and as with most things, it's those who are most senior in an organisation who probably have worked from home hitherto. They come in when they want to and say, yes, I'm working at my club or something like that, if they happen to be in London, and all things like that. So from that point of view, it isn't something that necessarily is new. What is new is that it has spread a bit more in terms of both geography, types of work, and also in seniority. So you've got all sorts of people working from different locations.
Thanks, Martin. Right, second question, Martin. Thank you so much. What are the options for introducing hybrid working in the workplace, in a business or organisation?
Well, in tune with my previous answer, I would say it's almost endless. It depends on the motivation for considering the hybrid working. Why is it that you want to introduce it? Obviously, with the pandemic, we've had a situation where it's been enforced on many people if they want to continue trading and keep the wheels of business in motion. But there are obviously going to be different motivating factors now that we look to return to the sort of normal, if we can find what normal is, and everything keeps on track. So it might be that a business is looking at reduced overhead costs, for instance. looking at dispensing with office space, or looking at reducing the amount of office space that they've got so that they use it in a different way, or even persuading somebody else to rent their office space while they work at home, who knows. Then you've got the idea of increased productivity. There is obviously a thought that if you're getting up and not having to commute, that you can spend more time working. So you get up, you walk the big commute to, to the office within the house, and you've saved the walk down the road, to get on the bus, to get on the train, etc., etc. So those things, can increase productivity. There's also the fact that inter-office meetings can take place on platforms such as this. Others are available, so that you can have your internal meetings over a platform such as this, and your external meetings, so that you don't need to rush down to Bideford or wherever it happens to be for that sales meeting. You can have it from the comfort of your own home, and what have you. So there are some sort of ideas of productivity that come into play at that point. But it's not necessarily a one-way street with productivity, because you've also got oversight and management and things like that. How do you cope with those? Do you know that you're increasing your productivity, or is it just merely the case that you think somebody is being more busy, and what have you? It may be that you find out a bit later they were busy, but not necessarily doing the work for you. So there are all sorts of issues that one has to consider there, and whether it does increase productivity. Is it the case that a meeting via Zoom or whatever is as productive as everybody getting round at a table and thrashing out certain ideas and marking them up on a whiteboard or flip chart or something like that? That sort of in quotes old school world of thinking can actually also pay dividends as well. And then you're looking at whether there is more motivation for people working from home, because they are in their own location, they feel more comfortable. But again, is that quite the same? A lot of people, as I've mentioned previously, have been forced into this situation and working at a kitchen table with without the right equipment, and having to cope with all sorts of distractions within the home, of which there can be many, is not necessarily motivating. And there will be thousands of stories of people saying, I'm just glad to get back in an office and want to work there. I think you then also have to look at that motivation, how it translates in terms of culture within the workplace as well. At the moment, we're limited on the choices that we can make, even though we had the so-called Freedom Day start on Monday. The situation is rather confused. Some businesses will be saying that they're still going to have restrictions within the workplace. There's the whole thing of, do I mask or don't I mask, on all that sort of stuff. So I think the office-based environment, the ones that have been disrupted most over time, will have to reassess what their culture is. And do they want the spontaneity of human interaction that gets things going? Because we haven't really had that. Everything is it's there. You only, phone calls, yes, you can do a conference call, but you have to set the conference call up. You won't have that spontaneity of just grabbing a few people from different desks saying, hey, I've got this particular idea, and this is something I think we should work on, or just looking at this, I think there's a different direction we can go on this particular project and everything, without actually inviting everybody to a meeting to then discuss it and then suddenly realize that the spontaneity has gone out of it completely. And then you've also got the issue of training. We've had that in the legal profession. How do you train people when it's over a screen? You can do it over the screen. I mean, we've got all sorts of schemes that have been set up for new arrivals since since all of this started, and they do have constant Zoom on, to interact with each other, and that has worked to some extent. But again, you have to look at the situation that you're putting those people in. Is it something that does actually suit training by sort of Zoom or whatever? I remember when I was learning this trade, that one of the great training points was listening in just over my shoulder to telephone conversations and everything. You don't get that. You don't get that there. So, and then there are some flexibility points with skills retention, who might be lost because of relocation. There are all sorts of business where somebody's moved out of area, but they can be back in area because they're connected. You can extend your recruitment net, as it were, as well. And you've got some sort of team flexibility because you can have those meetings. But again, it'll all settle down in a way which I think is very hard to predict, because it will be different in different locations. Because some people will want to actually have, people in a particular location. And if you can imagine that, a team of 7 and 5 of them say, oh, actually, I'd be glad to get back to the office, and we've all got our own mugs of tea and all that sort of stuff like that. And then you've got 2 people who said, now I'm determined to work from home. And then suddenly, well, the other 5, they're all in an office, they're all seeing each other. So I think we have to look at those particular drivers as well as to how people feel, because we know that over the past months or so, a lot of people, have felt lonely and distanced. And do we continue that, or do we have, hence the term, blended working, where you do a bit of both and you get the best of both worlds? Finding that level is going to be the difficulty. And are you going to be reactive or proactive in the way that you do this? And what is the objective? Going back to what I said at the start of answering the question, is what is the actual objective in making the change? Is it to save space? In which case, what do? You can save some space. But once you've got rid of that office or whatever, and you suddenly realize that you then need a new office because everybody's fed up of working from home, where does that put you? What are the boundaries as well, if any, that you have on this working? And, is it just purely by place, or are you looking at place and time? Because people have worked different hours over these past 6 months. Or do you want to get back to sort of core office hours? Again, the reasoning behind that will be different for lots of different companies.
Thanks, Martin. And an interesting point that you make, that we are still in flux, that just because restrictions have ended on Monday doesn't necessarily mean, we're now looking at the new normal. And I think obviously a concern that many businesses have is number of staff having to go into self-isolation because of being pinged by test and trace. That's something that perhaps hasn't been as prevalent in previous lockdowns and considerations. So we're going to come on to a question about that, about the fact that there may be changes to requests in how working patterns kind of happen. So we'll come on to that in a second. So you've talked a lot about the drivers and the objectives of changing to this blended way of working, and they're very positive. But I wonder whether you could share what some of the employment law concerns are with people working remotely, whether that be at home or elsewhere.
Well, you can look at the need to tailor your standard contract, so that you've got everything in place for changing that contract. However, you could also leave the contract as it is and have a policy for hybrid working, so that you give yourself a bit of flexibility as an employer as to what's going on. If you change the contract straight off and say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and everybody agrees, let's not go into the whole sort of negotiation for changes, but let's say that there's a sensible conversation between employer and employee, and they go, yeah, let's do this, we'd like to do this, and it's all very amicable about the way they do it. Once you've changed the contract, that's it. You've changed that contract. You then have to have that conversation again if you want to bring it back to where you were before or into some other shape. If you have a policy about hybrid working, you could separate this from what you would view as a flexible working request, for instance. Flexible working request, you can only make those as an employee every 12 months. So it is about permanent change, permanent being at least 12 months. But then, of course, when you're doing that, you're not as flexible, sorry to bend the words a bit, in bringing things back if you wanted to do that. So you could have a policy, and I've been designing these for various clients, to give you a sort of a halfway house. So you have a hybrid policy which doesn't look at changed hours necessarily. It looks at just the location of where the work is done. And you're looking at starting off and saying, well, when we talk about remotely, we mean just the home. So that is where you've been doing that. There are other places that people could work, because part of the things that you've got to consider are all those cultural things, but also the supervision that I was talking about as well. And if it's not working out, you want to be able to draw those people back in and change things. It's easier to do if you've done it at a low level view as a policy, and you've set minimum attendance requirements within that policy for being in the office. And that truly is the hybrid thing. They're looking at trying to do both, and it's working out what percentage works best there. You've also got to look at issues like protecting confidential information as well. So that is a very strong legal concern about what is happening to that data. Is it left there so that daughter Tracy can scribble all over it, or so that when Uncle Frank comes around, for an evening tipple and everything, picks it up and looks at it, and goes, "Well, that's interesting work you're doing." Look at all those particular items as well, and it's not just physical documents we're talking about. We're also talking about how you actually secure things over the internet and everything like that. You've got health and safety implications as well. What are the responsibilities? Well, the employer is still responsible for that person's well-being in the workplace, because the workplace has suddenly just changed. Okay, so you need to carry out risk assessments to make sure that it isn't a kitchen with a rickety chair, etc., etc. What specialist equipment might be needed, and it might be that the specialist equipment required within the office. Are you then going to be able to duplicate that within the home? And insurance arrangements as well, making sure that your insurance policy covers you for a situation where somebody is working from home. Should do, but check your policy. I mean, we could go into the details of that, but it really will depend on what those particular arrangements are. And also, again, sorting out the supervision arrangements, trying to bring people in or whatever. And then, dare I say it, there's tax. I think that probably might be the time to bring Tom in.
I'm ready and waiting.
Shall we take the question about the implications of asking employees to work, the implications of employees asking to work overseas, as the first kind of question to both of you? That'll cover some tax questions, won't it, Tom?
Yeah, definitely. There's some good tax points there from both employee and employer standpoint. Since Martin's mentioned tax, I'm happy to take the lead, starting with give Martin a chance to have some water and take a breath. When I often speak to clients about either them choosing to work overseas or their employer sending them to work overseas, I always ask how long their intended stay is for, because there's potential implications of not only continuing UK residency, particularly if they're leaving for a short period of time, but obtaining a residency in a foreign country. And we have our own legislation on residency under the statutory residence test. It was introduced in 2013, and other countries will adopt, in my experience, very different rules. The US, for example, if you're a US citizen or have a green card, you are resident for US purposes wherever you are, even if you spend no time there. Australia tends to have a 4-year wind down from residency. So again, someone could be resident there in a period they're not aware of. When we're looking at those points, we've got to look at the double tax treaties between each country. There are similarities in a lot of them, but some articles can be very different. When we're looking at the employment position, tends to be around Article 14, 15 of most double tax treaties. And you may get protection from operating a local payroll if you don't have a permanent establishment in that foreign country, and that depends on what the individual's doing, and if they're spending less than 183 days in any 12-month period in that country. If you can't get that protection, then you're likely to be required to operate a local payroll and using a local payroll advisor to prepare that and what that may look like. You've then got your exchange rate differences for whatever their salary may be in the UK, how that works in a foreign jurisdiction. If we look at Spain, for example, they don't have the personal allowance like we do, so that individual may be subject to more taxes. How do we equalise that position? From there, you could be looking at continuing them on a UK payroll, particularly if they don't meet, if you can get double tax treaty protection, that is, and how that income tax position looks like, and indeed their national insurance position, because they may be required to pay national insurance and social security in 2 jurisdictions. Double tax treaties don't cover national insurance, they only cover income tax. So that could be a lost tax to that individual and indeed the employer if there's no reciprocal agreement between the 2 jurisdictions. Double tax treaties, we tend to have a lot of countries. Reciprocal agreements we pretty much have with EEA countries, the US, I think Japan, Australia, and a couple of others. That's it. So there's a lot of countries not covered by that. So you could be looking at individuals perhaps moving home to countries like India, Pakistan, and working from there. You could be looking at losing some taxes there. Another thing that crops up a lot, particularly with the chargeable entities, so not so much charities and not-for-profit organisations, is permanent establishment for corporation tax or direct tax purposes as well. If the individual is performing certain duties, and that tends to be acting as an agent or being able to sign contracts with clients, then you could have a permanent establishment presence in that other country, and you may have to register for local corporation tax purposes as well. And that's where certain entities might use sub-companies and register local companies in those jurisdictions to ensure that whatever's going on in that country is shielded and separate from the UK hold company, as it were. So that's always an issue. The rules for permanent establishments for corporation tax and payroll are different. They're quite specific. There are some similarities, but you would have to look at both in separate positions to make sure that you're happy that you haven't got a permanent establishment for both purposes. Those are the sorts of things I tend to look at, starting with the residency issue, seeing how long the individual's going for, what package are you providing them to move. Some of you may be aware that you can provide an individual with up to £8,000 of relocation costs, as long as those costs are qualifying. So you may be able to offer tax-free incentives if it's a business reason why that person's having to move overseas or being seconded overseas.
Tom, before I ask Martin about the employment kind of implications of kind of employees asking to work overseas, have you seen an increase in requests for the kind of from new clients and existing clients kind of looking into this on your side?
Probably not an increase. It's been a bit of both. There was a backlog of things happening potential with the UK leaving Europe. A lot of European countries are looking to set up corporates in the UK and send some of their top people here for a couple of years. That was all put on hold for a while, and then last year everybody pulled the plug and said we're going to do it anyway, doesn't matter about lockdown, we need to get it set up. So that created a lot of work in that position. Weirdly, a lot of clients had people that just went home. Especially in London. Some of my larger law firm clients and other professional service clients, people just packed up the stuff, went home, and 3 months later the HR team found out they'd gone. And what do we do now? Oh, well, what country are they in? We were talking countries, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, countries where perhaps there isn't an in-depth local knowledge of them. And so we had to sort of play catch up a bit. In some instances, actually, partners of the firms that have gone home. So it wasn't an employment tax issue. It was someone is now running the partnership from India. What do we do? So yeah, there was playing some catch up with some HR teams, but the flow, there probably wasn't more of it, but the flow was potentially none and then a lot.
Sure.
So it was good fun.
Yeah, really interesting. Thanks for that, Tom. Martin, employment law considerations for people that are wanting to now change where they live and change where they work.
Well, first of all, hopefully have a situation where they tell you if they have moved abroad. That would be nice. I mean, because obviously remote working isn't just limited to this country. I mean, it's possible that anybody can work anywhere. I mean, that could be one of the things that comes out of this, is that if people realise that they can have an employee based in Norfolk rather than, you know, in an office within London or whatever, they could actually look at having somebody in Nepal. So those things, you know, things further down the track and probably not relevant for this, but it does mean you can work anywhere. And you've got all those tax issues, which I'm glad there's people like Tom who can work those out. In terms of the legal side of it, from an employment law point of view, we're looking at what the jurisdiction is for employment issues. And in that respect, you would expect a contract to say what jurisdiction applies to it. I've got a series of clients in different parts of Africa, and they have a contract which draws the law back to this country rather from the base of the country that they're actually in at the time. Now, that is because of the nature of the work that they're doing. It makes sense that it's an English organisation that is sending them out there. Everything should be drawn back to this country. But that doesn't necessarily mean to say that that will be the case. You can put it down there, but if you look at other countries, I mean, Tom's mentioned, you know, different jurisdictions around the world as well. They may not have the same view. You could put down that you think the jurisdiction, it should be England. Because obviously Scotland is different, but you can put that down. But you know, if say it's someone in France, they may look at that and say, well, sorry, but no, actually our rules apply because you have been here for such and such an amount of time, which is, you know, hence Tom's first question is, how long are you going to be there? Actually, French law, you know, for example, could apply. And I'm not going to start opining about French law, but I pick on them because they're the closest to where we are at the moment. But it is the case that a lot of people may have just decided that they will zip across the channel and do that. And they may find that they are in a situation where they have to work that out with those local jurisdictions in terms of duties. And an employer will then have that sort of battle. In terms of disputes, yes, they will come back to this country if an employee thinks that it's more worthwhile bringing a case within this country. So, you know, if it happens to be, you know, South Sudan in Africa, you might not think the setup would be that favourable to the employees. But if somebody is in France, they might find that they're better off trying to claim that their employment is based in France because that is where they've been working. Yes, it's for work within this country or whatever, but they've been working in France for X amount of time. They've consulted with a local lawyer, and it seems as though their rights are more enhanced under French law than they are under English law. So you have all sorts of battles there as to where it's going to be. And now, you know, if that host country is going to take that particular view, you've got to bear that in mind. And when that posting takes place, you've got to bear that in mind whether they can actually be there. Obviously, you know, it's not as easy to float over to France as it was before Brexit. You've got to have all sorts of permissions. You might be dual nationality over there, but even if you are dual nationality and it's easy to go over there, or you're from, you know, from Ireland, yeah, you can go there. But it might be that they grab hold of you in terms of where they think the work is being done, even if that work is centred to this country.
Thanks, Martin.
And yeah, sort it out before you go.
Please.
Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you so much. I've got a question that's come in about a worker who, a non-UK national, who has been working at in a different country since the end of December because of COVID, and can't get back because the country isn't on the green list, presumably is I think it might even be on a red list. Is there any kind of leeway for this employer on time working overseas because of COVID? So this person's still paid from a GB payroll and doesn't carry out any tasks kind of deemed to have the other countries, you know, in that country and in that office. But what should this employer be thinking about, Martin and Tom?
Tom, do you want to take the tax issue on that?
Yeah, happily. The first key bit is, it doesn't matter who the duties are performed for, it matters where they're performed for tax purposes. So all of the work could be for a UK client, UK business, but if they're performing those duties overseas, then it is likely, given the amount of time spent already since December, over 183 days, that you will not get double tax treaty protection from being taxed in that overseas jurisdiction. So it is likely that a non-UK payroll will have to be set up and they'd have to be paid, and the necessary withholdings will have to be made in that jurisdiction. For what's happened in the last 6 months, if that individual isn't UK resident, particularly after our tax year end from 5th of April, and particularly if they're likely to stay there for another few months, you may have to make some adjustments to your FPS submissions over the last, since April particularly, and reclaim the necessary income tax and get a repayment for that individual, so that in year, rather than waiting until the end through self-assessment, to ensure that their tax equalisation is fine. It sounds like they're fine in respect of exchange rate conversions. They're probably quite comfortable with that, but certainly making sure that your filings are up to date in the overseas jurisdiction is important. In the UK, we do have some relaxations for when people will come into the UK for short periods of time. If it's up to 150 days a year, it's technically 183, but things become more complicated. 150 days a year is the important one. Someone's coming to work for a UK PE over that period of time, then you don't have to file or withhold UK payrolls. I haven't seen another country that has those relaxed rules. So it is highly likely that payroll submissions will be required.
Thanks, Tom. Anything to add, Martin?
Yeah, again, you know, we're looking at the cross-jurisdictional issues that Tom has outlined, but from a different angle. If we presume that that person is allowed to be in that country for that amount of time, then that ticks one box. However, are they allowed to be in that country and perform work? That could be a different issue. And again, it will depend on the laws within that country that they happen to be in as to whether that is allowed, and whether that country is taking a more sort of relaxed view, bearing in mind that those people cannot get back out again. But again, it will depend on that country as to what they consider. There are some places that say, well, once your work permits will run out, that's it. You got to leave. Now, the practicalities of that, of trying to leave one country to go to another country when you know, there's no transport between the two, etc., etc. That doesn't really come into it for some jurisdictions. They say, well, sorry, but you know, you've run out of time here. And so from that point of view, you know, you have to consider that there will be some people who will be left in limbo. The where the work is performed issue is slightly different than from the tax point of view, because it can be that even if you've not got a jurisdiction clause within the contract, if that work can be tied back to this country, you could imply that it is necessarily in this country. But again, if that person is trapped, for want of a better phrase, in the wrong country, they have to look out for matters within that particular country. Tying it back to this country is all well and good if they can do it, but not much good if they're in trouble in the local jurisdiction.
Thank you to you both.
I have a good example on that, actually. I have a client who is Australian citizen. He's moving to the UK at the end of this year. He's been working in the US for a number of years and he wants to rescind his green card. He has 10 days to get out of the US once he's done that. Regardless of COVID restrictions rules, he has 10 days as soon as he's done that. So he's got to get out. So he's trying to time that to match him when he's actually physically allowed to or able to get out.
Yeah, and the US are very good at extending their jurisdictional borders.
Yes.
You know, hence people wanting to give up green cards. You used to think, well, why would you want to do that? You know, well, it's your oyster, you can go to the States. I mean, trying to give up your citizenship in the States is a palaver, but people do it because they don't want to deal with the tax authorities there. And we're going to have lots of jurisdictional issues because of Brexit and on many fronts. But there's, in some respects, the whole storm as to where you can work and how you can do it and everything like that has been sort of put off for the moment because people are in strange situations. But as soon as everything is settled, there'll be lots of moves to say, well, why are you here? What you're doing, etc., etc. It's not, you know, it's not just a view of this country; it'll be a view of many other countries as well.
Thanks to you both for that answer.
Yeah, I mean, the essential thing is if that non-UK person is looking to work here, do they have permission to come here? Obviously, it's going to be different with EU being outside the EU, and I don't intend to sort of trawl over those waters too much in there, but obviously the exception is those from the Republic of Ireland who still have a standing right to be here without too much of a problem. But with the EU, it's, you know, is it going to be settled status? Is it going to be on a new type of visa application and everything like that? So it is going to be a matter of, you know, can you actually work here? It's different, of course, if they're then doing work from their own home location for somebody within the UK, and as long as they've got permission to do that work, whatever, it's fairly much, you know, not much of a problem. You've then got all the contractual issues that I've mentioned before about where it ties to, but those people may want to come here for meetings, but they, you know, shouldn't overstay their welcome, as it were, and find they're suddenly on a, you know, 6-7 month meeting, because that doesn't really look like a meeting anymore. So, you know, there are all sorts of issues that can arise. The simple thing is, do they have permission to carry out work in this country? And yes, meetings, business travel has not been halted for any, you know, in that respect. But are you living and working in here? Do you have permission to do it? Well, that's the first thing to do. Get that sorted.
Thanks so much. We're going to move away now from overseas nationals and working remotely overseas, and turn now to ask Tom, what are the potential tax and compliance implications of employees working from home? What should businesses be thinking about when they're employed?
Yeah, absolutely. Martin touched on it earlier, the fact that the employer may have to provide the employees with equipment to work from home to ensure that it meets their health and safety and insurance standards. In these instances, if you are supplying an employee stuff to home, like furniture, computer equipment, chairs, whatever it may be, that it is wholly, exclusively and necessarily for the purposes of their employment. And if you are meeting those conditions, then it's not considered a benefit. And people might use their laptop now and again in the evening for some personal web surfing, but that's likely to be incidental to the overall use of that equipment. So you wouldn't be talking about incurring a benefit. In some situations, the employee's internet might not be good enough. Certainly got clients who live in the sticks that can't get fibre and things like that, and are having issues with Zoom and Teams calls. It's been good fun over the last 18 months talking to those people. I'm sure we've all been there. But upgrading that internet, is it for business purposes? Do they have a separate office and things like that? If it is for wholly exclusively for the purposes of their employment, then those can absolutely be claims against the individual's employment income. The ways you can do that is, if someone's within self-assessment, you include it on your annual self-assessment return. If not, all employees rather, have PAYE coding notices. So update your coding notice and include a claim for those costs in there. It would probably be, if it's internet, it won't be a one-off claim, it'd be an annual one. But if you were purchasing your own equipment because your employer wouldn't supply it, check the contract to make sure that, usually they should be supplying it, then it would be a one-off standalone claim. In respect of working from home itself, the Revenue don't offer much, to be honest. They've got £6 a week from 6th of April 2020. That's all they're offering as an expense for the additional light and heat and electricity costs. Again, £6 a week, what's that, 312 quid a year? If you're a higher rate taxpayer, it's about 125 quid a year in tax that you can reclaim. Again, if you're not within self-assessment, through your coding notice. If you are within self-assessment, just include it on there. There's not much more to it than that. They don't offer a great deal. The one thing that I'm sure people have found, and I've certainly found with the Revenue, is they play catch up. The use of home rule used to be £4 a week. Apparently, people working 5 days a week at home is only worth £2 more. I'm not sure a lot of people, don't know what people's electricity bills have gone up by, but I'm sure it was more than that, just because of the percentile increase, let alone the additional work from home. So whether they change that since all of their staff are still working from home, we'll see. I'm sure those guys up in Cumbernauld seeing a lot higher costs as well. So will they update that guidance?
Thanks, Tom. I'm just going to jump in now with a question that we've had from one of our attendees. Interesting question. So this person is a European citizen, so theoretically have no automatic right to work in the UK. But they say that anybody can open their UK-based limited company and employ themselves. So basically, you are working in the UK as a limited company director, even though you're not theoretically allowed to work in the UK. What happens in this situation? Is there any oversight? Don't know, Martin. I don't know. Tom, do you want to take the question?
If the director employs themselves to do work, then they will be treated as an employee, and therefore the rights pertaining to employees will apply. All the things that I've talked about already. Okay. If they are merely a director and do nothing other than being a director, i.e. director's duties, then obviously, yeah, they could sit back, in that case. But I think it's very hard to distinguish those particular details in the way that you're running things, especially if you're the only director and there are no other employees, and yet somehow the company is functioning.
I think this person's hit on something fairly interesting there. Right, I've got another question, and I think we have touched on this a little bit throughout the session, but I think it's pertinent because I think a lot of firms are grappling with this. So lots of professional services firms, this person thinks, will want to employ and also employ people wherever they want. Are you seeing, best practice models or guides about how to facilitate that kind of question, that kind of discussion? This person acknowledges there's lots of variations in circumstances, but I think what they're getting at is it's quite a murky situation, and obviously you've obviously outlined a lot of questions that you need to ask. Is there any kind of is there a model? Is there any kind of best practice guides out there that you think would be useful for businesses to have a look at?
Yeah, from my perspective in tax, especially in professional services, if we take a law firm as an example, if that firm are looking to expand and go into other jurisdictional laws, then they, generally speaking, my clients have set up new companies, and that individual who has gone over to work in that jurisdiction and try and set up a new business in, let's say, French law, so they need to be based in France, then they will look to set up a new entity to cover that. And the UK's arm of the business will pretty much fully own that entity, and the individual will be employed within that entity in the separate country, because they'll be performing all of their duties there for that work. And that sort of protects them in respect of tax purposes, and it particularly protects the UK arm. If they're an individual who is just working outside the UK because that's where they live and it might be cheaper to employ someone, then you really do need to look at what their responsibilities and duties are. If they are an administrative type person or a salesperson that has to revert when anything needs to be signed, then you're likely not to create a permanent establishment in that country, particularly for corporation tax purposes, or local business tax purposes, I should say. So you're likely to be able to avoid that position. There wouldn't be much you need to do. You may still need to operate a local payroll, but to be honest, in the general scheme of things, operating a one-person, two-person payroll in a country through a payroll agent isn't going to be a great cost to you, particularly if you're looking at the difference between employing someone in Romania, Bulgaria, or London. It's, you know, it's still going to be a lot cheaper. But yeah, it's where you've got someone who is signing contracts, making business decisions. That's where you look to incorporate a new structure in that country to protect the UK side of the operations.
Great, thanks, Tom. Very helpful. Anything to add, Martin?
Yeah, not really to what I've already said. Is there a best model for shutting down operations and starting them up somewhere else? There isn't really a model as such. It depends what you're doing, or what you could be in the situation is that you're creating redundancies here, and outsourcing your business to somewhere cheaper or whatever. If you want to take those people with you to that other country, well, that's up to them to decide whether they want to go with you and whether they've got the permission to be able to work in that country. One could say during our time in the EU, it was easier to send those people to go off and work in that country. That could be more difficult now. It's not impossible, but it could be more difficult. And as I mentioned before, if you're looking at remote working within this country, is there going to be a bit more of a prevalence for people suddenly saying, well, yeah, we can do remote working anywhere and save even more money by having our operations somewhere else? We all know about the call center setups in various places of the world. That may increase in some respects. Who knows? But the options are endless as to how to do it. There isn't a strict model as to what you should do as such if you are looking to basically transfer the work out of this country.
Yeah. Thanks, Martin. And I think it's brilliant here on this call today to discuss the generalities and discuss kind of best practice, but actually, without kind of pushing it too much. Obviously, that's where you and Tom do your day-to-day work. It's talking through the nuances of each and going through the questions that are really important to that business and the employees as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I've managed to get away with nearly an hour without saying it depends.
We've got one final question, which is about employment contracts for remote workers and non-UK nationals. So, Martin, do you what type is there any kind of, again, best practice for what type of employment contract or what should be in it?
Yeah, well, I mean, you are looking at creating a legally binding relationship. So basically do the contract as is required under law here. And that's, if you're trying to tie it to this country. So if you're looking at remote workers, as I said, you've got the choice of looking at the jurisdiction where those people happen to be, if it is outside of this country. If it is remote workers within this country, and all those people who've got permission to work here, so it doesn't really matter whether they're non-UK nationals or not, you're then looking at setting up your contract in the way that suits what you envisage to be the way of working. So where I mentioned, there is a possibility of having a policy where you start shifting things around because you want to do it. If you're fairly much certain that remote way of working is, or not in a specific office, if that's the way that you really want to rule things, then you're going to set out your contract as saying where the location is, because you have to say in the contract what the location of the work is, and that's a day one proposition. You've got to say where it is going to be working. So if you're looking to engage somebody, you've got to state where it's going to be, along with all the other requirements for any contract that's going to be issued. But yeah, it's making sure it's absolutely clear on the contract where the work's going to be and what the expectations are going to be. One of the differences is whether they're going to be a worker, an employee, or an employee, or whether they're going to be self-employed. But that sounds like a cue for a completely different session.
Exactly. Another Q&A, perhaps, another Q&A. Yeah. Well, that just leaves me to say a very big thank you to you, Martin, and Tom, for your expertise, for sharing your expert guidance today. Really appreciate your time. So for those of you that are new to Brighton Chamber, we're a membership organisation that exists to help businesses thrive in Sussex. So if you found today's session useful, you may want to check out our events calendar to find out what else is coming up, and also look at what benefits you can get from being a member of the Chamber. So just before I let you go to enjoy the sunshine or get back to your desk and work, make sure you have a look at the Chamber events calendar for what's coming up on our website, so brightonchamber.co.uk. We have a brilliant session on the 12th of August, your questions answered session, which is all about how to access support for exporting, and that's going to be with the department, how to access support for exporting from the Department of International Trade for the DIT. So if you're exporting or looking to do that, do check that out. And then at the end of August, on the 31st, we have a bite-sized learning on how to increase your revenue with a pricing strategy. So thank you so much to you all for joining us today for this Q&A. Thanks again to Martin and Tom, and have a great rest of the week, everyone. Take care.